Welcome to week 9 of Beelzebub's Tales by George Gurdjieff, All and Everything. We're reading The Relative Understanding of Time 121 to 133. Does anyone want to do the reading for this week? Okay. I will do it then. 1, 2, 1, 3, 3. Okay. Chapter 16, I think. Yeah. Chapter 16, The Relative Understanding of Time. After a short pause, Beelzebub continued thus. Before telling you further about the three brain beings who have taken your fancy and who breed on the planet Earth, it is, in my opinion, absolutely necessary for you, for a clear representation of the strangeness of their psyche, and in general, for a better understanding of everything concerning this peculiar planet, first of all to have an accurate representation of their time calculation, and of how the being sensation of what is called the process of the flow of time in the presences of the three brain beings of the planet has gradually changed, and also of how this process now flows in the presences of the contemporary three-brained beings there. It must be made clear to you, because only then will you have the possibility clearly to represent to yourself and understand the events there which I have already related, and those I shall yet relate. You must first know that for the definition of time, the three brain beings of that planet take the year as the basic unit of their time calculation, just as we do, and also, like us, they define the duration of their year by the time of a certain movement of their planet in relation to other definite cosmic concentration. That is to say, they take that period in the course of which their planet, during its movement, that is, during the processes of falling and catching up, makes what is called its quinquennial revolution in relation to its sun. It is similar to our reckoning of a year for our planet Caratus, which is the period of time between the nearest approach of the sun Samos to the sun Celos and its next similar approach. 100 of such years of theirs, the beings of the earth call a century, and they divide this year of theirs into 12 parts, and each part they call a month. For the definition of the duration of this month of theirs, they take the time of that completed during which that larger fragment, which was separated from their planet and which they now call moon, makes, owing to the same cosmic law of falling and catching up, its full quinquennial revolution in relation to their planet. It must be noticed that the 12 quinquennial revolutions of the said moon do not correspond exactly to a single quinquennial revolution of their planet round its sun, and therefore they have made some compromise or other when calculating these months of theirs, so that in the sum total these may correspond more or less to reality. Further, they divide these months of theirs into 30 diurnities, or, as they usually say, days, and a diurnity they reckon as that span of time during which their planet makes its completed rotation during the actualizing of the said cosmic laws. Bear in mind, by the way, that they also say it is day when it is in the atmosphere of their planet, just as in general on all other planets on which, as I have already told you, the cosmic process called ilnosoparnian is actualized, that trogo-auto-egocratic process which we call Kushta Salvracht periodically proceeds, and they also call this cosmic phenomenon daylight. As regards the other process, the opposite one, which we call Kulstazakt, they call it night and refer to it as it is dark, and thus the three brain beings breeding on the planet Earth call the greatest period of the flow of time century, and this century of theirs consists of 100 years, and a year has 12 months, and a month has an average of 30 days, that is diurnities. Further, they divide their diurnity into 24 hours, and an hour into 60 minutes, and a minute they divide into 60 seconds. But as in general, my boy, you do not yet know of the exceptional peculiarity of this cosmic phenomenon time, you must first be told that genuine objective science formulates this cosmic phenomenon thus. Time in itself does not exist. There is only the totality of the results ensuing from all the cosmic phenomena present in a given place. Time itself no being can either understand by reason or sense by any outer or inner being function. It cannot even be sensed by any graduation of instinct which arises and is present in every more or less independent cosmic concentration. It is possible to judge time only if one compares real cosmic phenomena which proceed in the same place and under the same conditions where time is being constated and considered. It is necessary to notice that in the great universe, all phenomena in general, without exception, wherever they arise and manifest, are simply successively law-conformable fractions of some whole phenomenon which has its prime arising on the most holy Sun Absolute. And in consequence, all cosmic phenomena, whenever they proceed, have a sense of objectivity. And these successfully law-conformable fractions are actualized in every sort of respect, and even in the sense of their involution and evolution, owing to the chief cosmic law, the sacred heptaparapashnisnok. Only time alone has no sense of objectivity, because it is not the result of the fractioning of any definite cosmic phenomena, and it does not issue from anything, but blends always with everything and becomes self-sufficiently independent. Therefore, in the whole of the universe, it alone can be called and extolled as the ideally unique subjective phenomenon. Thus, my boy, uniquely time alone, or as it is sometimes called, the hieropas, has no source from which its arising should depend, but like divine love, flows always, as I have already told you, independently by itself, and blends proportionately with all the phenomena present in the given place and in the given arisings of our great universe. Again, I tell you, you will be able clearly to understand all that I have just told you only when, as I have already promised you, I shall specially explain to you sometime later all about the fundamental laws of world creation and world maintenance. Meanwhile, remember this also, that time has no source of its arising, and cannot, like all other cosmic phenomena in every cosmic sphere, establish its exact presence. The already mentioned objective science, therefore, has, for its examination of time, a standard unit, similar to that for an exact definition of the density and quality, in the sense of the vivifyingness of their vibrations, of all cosmic substances in general present in every place and in every sphere of our great universe. And for the definition of time, this standard unit has from long ago been the moment of what is called the sacred ego-cool-natsnanian sensation, which always appears in the most holy cosmic individuals dwelling on the most holy Sun Absolute, whenever the vision of our uni-being endlessness is directed into space and directly touches their presences. This standard unit has been established in objective science for the possibility of exactly defining and comparing the differences between the gradations of the processes of the subjective sensations of separate conscious individuals, and also of what are called diverse tempos among various objective cosmic phenomena which are manifested in various spheres of our great universe, and which actualize all cosmic arisings, both large and small. The chief particularity of the process of the flow of time in the presence of cosmic arisings of various scales consists in this, that all of them perceive it in the same way and in the same sequence. In order that you may meanwhile represent to yourself, if only approximately, what I have just said, let us take an example of the process of the flow of time proceeding in any drop of the water in that decanter standing there on the table. Every drop of water in that decanter is in itself also a whole independent world, a world of microcosmoses. In that little world, as in other cosmoses, there also arise and exist relatively independent infinitesimal individuals or beings. For the beings of that infinitesimal world also, time flows in the same sequence in which the flow of time is sensed by all individuals in all other cosmoses. These infinitesimal beings also, like the beings of cosmoses of other scales, have their experience of a definite duration for all their perceptions and manifestations. And, also like them, they sense the flow of time by the comparison of the duration of the phenomena around them. Exactly like the beings of other cosmoses, they are born, they grow up, they unite and separate for what are called sex results, and they also fall sick and suffer. And ultimately, like everything existing in which objective reason has not become fixed, they are destroyed forever. For the entire process of the existence of these infinitesimal beings of the smallest world, time of a definite proportionate duration also ensues from all the surrounding phenomena which are manifested in the given cosmic scale. For them also time of definite length is required for the processes of their arising and formation, as well as for various events in the process of their existence up to their complete final destruction. In the whole course of the process of existence of the beings of this drop of water also, corresponding sequential definite, what are called passages of the flow of time, are also required. A definite time is required for their joys and for their sorrows, and in short, for every other kind of indispensable being experiencing, down to what are called runs of bad luck, and even to periods of thirst for self-perfection. I repeat, Among them also, the process of the flow of time has its harmonious sequence, and this sequence ensues from the totality of all the phenomena surrounding them. The duration of the process of the flow of time is generally perceived and sensed in the same way by all the aforementioned cosmic individuals and by the already completely formed, what are called instinctivized units, but only with that difference which ensues from the difference in the presences and states at the given moment of these cosmic arisings. It must be noticed, however, my boy, that though for separate individuals existing in any independent cosmic unit, their definition of the flow of time is not objective in the general sense, yet nevertheless for them themselves it acquires a sense of objectivity, since the flow of time is perceived by them according to the completeness of their own presence. The same drop of water which we have taken as an example can serve for a clearer understanding of this thought of mine. Although in the sense of general universal objectivity, the whole period of the process of the flow of time in that same drop of water is for the whole of its subjective, yet for the beings existing in the drop of water itself, the said given flow of time is perceived by them as objective. For the clarification of this, those beings called hypochondriacs can serve, who exist among the three brain beings of the planet Earth, which has taken your fancy. To these terrestrial hypochondriacs it very often seems that time passes infinitely slow and long, and, as they express themselves, it drags phenomenally tediously. And so, exactly in the same way, it might also sometimes seem to some of the infinitesimal beings existing in that drop of water, assuming, of course, that there happen to be such hypochondriacs among them, that time drags very slowly and phenomenally tediously. But actually, from the point of view of the sensation of the duration of time by your favourites of the planet Earth, the whole length of the existence of the beings' microcosmoses lasts only a few of their minutes, and sometimes even only a few of their seconds. Now, in order that you might still better understand time and its peculiarities, we may as well compare your age with the corresponding age of a being existing on that planet Earth. And for this comparing of ours, we too must take the same standard unit of time, which, as I have already told you, objective science employs for such calculations. Bear in mind, first of all, that according to the data about which you will also learn when I shall later have specially explained to you the fundamental laws of world creation and world maintenance, it is also established by the same objective science that in general all normal three-brain beings, and among them certainly even the beings arising on our planet Karatas, sense the sacred ego-kulnatsnanian action for the definition of time 49 times more slower than the same sacred action is sensed by the sacred individuals dwelling on the most holy Sun Absolute. Consequently, the process of the flow of time for the three-brain beings of our Karatas flows 49 times more quickly than on the Sun Absolute, and thus it should flow also for the beings breeding on the planet Earth. And it is also calculated that during the period of time in which the Sun, Samos, actualizes its nearest approach to the Sun, Selos, which period of the flow of time is considered a year for the planet Karatas, the planet Earth actualizes in relation to its Sun, Ors, 389 of its Croelno-Tonalnian revolutions, from which it follows that our year, according to the conventionally objective time calculation, is 389 times longer than the period of time which your favourites consider and call their year. It may not be without interest for you to know that all these calculations were partly explained to me by the great arch-engineer of the universe, his measurability, Archangel Algmat-Tant. May he be perfected unto the holy Anklet. He explained this to me when, on the occasion of the first great misfortune to this planet Earth, he came to the planet Mars as one of the sacred members of the third most great commission, and the captain of the trans-space ship Omnipresent, with whom I had several friendly talks during that journey, also partly explained to me during my journey home. Now, it must be further noticed that you, as a three-brained being who arose on the planet Karatas, are at the present time still only a boy of 12 years, and in respect of being and of reason, you are exactly like a boy of 12 on the planet Earth who has not yet been formed and who is not yet cognizant of himself. Through which, being age, all these three-brained beings arising there also live during the process of their growing up to the being of a responsible being. All the features of the whole of your psyche, what are called your character, temperament, inclinations, and in short, all the particularities of your psyche which are manifested exteriorly, are exactly the same of those of a still immature and pliant three-brained being there of the age of 12 years. And so it follows from all that has been said that although according to our time calculations you are still only like a boy of 12 there on the planet Earth, who is not yet formed and not yet cognizant of himself. Yet according to their subjective understanding and their being sensations of the flow of time, you have already existed by their time calculation, not 12 years, but the whole of 4,668 years. Thanks to all that I have said, you will have material for the clarification of certain of those factors which were later the cause that the average proper normal duration of their existence began gradually to diminish, and that is now already become, in the objective sense, almost nothing. Strictly speaking, this gradual diminution of the average length of the existence of the three-brained beings of that ill-fated planet, which has finally brought the whole of the duration of their existence to nothing, did not have one cause but many and very varied causes. And among these many and varied causes, the first and the chief one is, of course, that nature had to adapt herself correspondingly, gradually, to change their presences to those that they now have. And concerning all the rest of the causes, justice demands that I should first of all emphasize that on that ill-fated planet, these causes might never have arisen had that first cause not occurred there, from which at least, in my opinion, they all chiefly ensued, though of course very gradually. Concerning all this, you will understand in the course of further talks of mine about these three-brained beings, and meanwhile I will tell you only of the first and chief cause, namely, why and how great nature herself was compelled to take stock of their presences, and to form them into such new presences. You must first be told that there exists in the universe generally two principles of the duration of being existence. The first kind, or first principle of being existence, which is called fulas nit napnian, is proper to the existence of all three-brained beings arising on any planet of our great universe, and the fundamental aim and sense of the existence of these beings is that there must proceed through them the transmutation of cosmic substances necessary for what is called the common cosmic trogo-auto-egocratic process. And it is according to the second principle of being existence that all one-brained and two-brained beings in general exist wherever they may arise. And the sense and aim of the existence of these beings also consist in this, and there are transmuted through them the cosmic substances required not for the purposes of a common cosmic character, but only for that solar system, or even only for that planet alone, in which and upon which these one-brained and two-brained beings arise. In any case, for the further elucidation of the strangeness of the psyche of those three-brained beings who have taken your fancy, you must know this also, that in the beginning, after the organ Kundabuffer with all its properties had been removed from their presences, the duration of their existences was according to the Fulmenau's Napnian principle, that is to say, they were obliged to exist until there was coated in them and completely perfected by reason what is called the body Kesjan, or as they themselves later began to name this being part of theirs, of which, by the way, contemporary beings know only by hearsay, the astral body. And so, my boy, when later, for reasons of which you will learn in the course of my further tales, they began to exist already excessively abnormally, that is to say, quite unbecomingly for three-brained beings, and when in consequence of this, they had on the one hand ceased to emanate the vibrations required by nature for the maintenance of the separated fragments of their planet, and on the other hand had begun, owing to the chief peculiarity of their strange psyche, to destroy beings of other forms of their planet, thereby gradually diminishing the number of sources required for this purpose. Then nature herself was compelled gradually to actualize the presences of these three-brained beings according to the second principle, namely the principle itoklanos, that is, to actualize them in the same way in which she actualizes one-brained and two-brained beings, in order that the equilibrium of the vibrations required according to quality and quantity should be attained. As regards the meaning of the principle itoklanos, I shall also specially explain it to you sometime. And meanwhile remember that although the fundamental motives for the diminution of the duration of the existence of the three-brained beings of this planet were from causes not depending on them, yet nevertheless subsequently the main grounds for all the sad results were, and particularly now continue to be, the abnormal conditions of external ordinary being existence established by them themselves. Owing to these conditions, the duration of their existence has, down to the present time, continued to become shorter and shorter, and now is already diminished to such a degree that, at the present time, the difference between the duration of the process of the existence of the three-brained beings of other planets in the whole of the universe and the duration of the process of the existence of the three-brained beings of the planet Earth has become the same as the difference between the real duration of their existence and the duration of the existence of the infinitesimal beings in that drop of water we took as an example. You now understand, my boy, that even the most great Hieropath of time has also been compelled to actualize obvious absurdities in the presence of these unfortunate three-brained beings who arise and exist on this ill-fated planet Earth. And thanks to all that I have just explained to you, you can put yourself in the position and understand the although merciless, yet always and in everything just hero pass. Having said these last words, Beelzebub became silent. And when he again spoke to his grandson, he said with a heavy sigh, "Eh, my dear boy, later, when I have told you more about the three-brained beings of that ill-fated planet Earth, you yourself will understand and form your own opinion about everything. You yourself will very well understand that although the fundamental causes of the whole chaos that now reigns on that ill-fated planet Earth were certain unforeseennesses coming from above on the part of various sacred individuals, yet nevertheless the chief cause for the developing of further ills are only those abnormal conditions of ordinary being existence which they themselves gradually established and which they continue to establish down to the present time. In any case, my dear boy, when you learn more about these favourites of yours, not only I repeat, will you clearly see how pitiably small the duration of their existence of these unfortunates has gradually become in comparison with that normal duration of existence which has already long ago been established as the law for every kind of three-centred beings on the whole of our universe. But you will also understand that in these unfortunates, for the same reasons, there has gradually begun to disappear, and at the present time are quite absent in them, any normal being sensations whatever concerning any cosmic phenomenon. Although the beings of that ill-fated planet arose according to conventionally objective time reckoning many decades ago, not only have they not as yet any being sensation of cosmic phenomena, such as it is proper to all three-centred beings of the whole of our universe to have, but there is not in the reason of these unfortunates even an approximate representation of the genuine causes of these phenomena. They have not an approximately correct representation even of those cosmic phenomena that proceed on their own planet round about them. That was a tongue twisty passage. So let me just have a little sip of coffee, and we can dive in. So there's a lot going on there, obviously with regards to time, and I think anyone who's like read some German idealism, Kant, I'm just seeing Kant, Schopenhauer there. We can talk about the astral body as well and the body Jan, because I believe that's the first mention of that, and the idea of basically how you can potentially get eternal life and how you can avoid being destroyed. And what else was in there? I guess the difference in time and how one time on certain levels is longer and time on certain levels is shorter, and how over time, due to our sort of diminishing faculties in a certain way, the lifespan, the objective lifespan of humans has become, well, the subjective lifespan of us has become shorter, and it seems there's some somewhat clear reasons for this. But does anyone have any immediate thoughts on that passage?
Sorry, I just arrived. Can you tell me the last pages you're reading so I can see my book?
We were just reading 121 to 133. So just the chapter,
Okay.
The relative understanding of time.
Okay, 1 second.
Yeah. Does anyone have any comments? No, I noticed there's a few less of us today, which is a bit, well, is what it is.
Well, it's a holiday here in the States too.
It's bank holiday, isn't it?
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know. I had a hard time with this chapter. It was a little dense for me.
Yeah. I think maybe I'll just sort of riff on my understanding. So, to put it simply, as I understand it, I mean, we really begin with this in everything for Gurdjieff, even though he emphasizes group work, is down to what the individual can achieve and in their own self-development. I think you always need to begin there and see how is this relating to, the whole thing of man can't do, and the idea is for the individual to wake up. So in what sense is everything he's talking about, in what sense does it relate back to that? And so when it's difficult to tie these together at this juncture, but obviously I've read a fair bit of other stuff. So, the idea of self-remembering, so the idea of when you are doing something, you do it consciously. So, as Joseph Azizi sort of explained it to me, a certain amount of your consciousness is aware of you doing it. So you're not in doing that when perhaps the emotional center comes in, or the intellectual center, or the instinctive center comes in. You're not just being drawn in by these things. You're conscious of the whole process, and so you're in control. And it's very difficult to do this now. To a degree, what allows you to do that is higher level influences. So we go back to that the ray of creation, which we spoke about before. So you begin with the absolute, and then that goes down to the sun. I think the image is on here. If I try to scroll up and find it, there we go. So absolute, all worlds, galaxy, sun, planets, Earth, moon. So these seven levels, which also go with the octave. Now, in relation to time, it seems that when they're speaking about objective time, we can think of that as all time. There has to be some form of... There has to be an entirety of time within which these subjective times are taking place. Now, even though philosophically it's sort of incorrect to say there's no such thing as time in time, right? So our subjective, or this is called the relative understanding of time. Our relative understanding of time, which is subjective to us as humans, even though that is not how time works, we can say that is in time, but it's only in time so much as we perceive it that way. So it's not objective, but it's just the way we perceive it. Much like, Kant sort of says, well, there might be cause and effect, but that's also everything has to be processed by our faculties. So time is subjective in that sense. But outside of that, there has to be some form of objective time, or an entirety of time. Think of it like that. Now, what Gurdjieff is sort of alluding towards with this, he's talking about the water and the decanter. He's talking about, very cryptically, as far as I can understand it, levels in the ray of creation, and in the idea of drawing in bigger influences. And when you are self-remembering, and I think really you could even use a practical example of this, is like when you're truly conscious of something you're doing and you're truly, truly focused, time is entirely different. Time expands in the process of learning, in moments of extremely high stress where your entire body is no longer being dragged along by like the subjective associations. You're no longer asleep, but when you're awake in those brief moments, time fundamentally alters. And it might be, someone is witnessing their wife giving birth, or maybe, you're a woman, you actually are giving birth, or maybe, you're suddenly in a car crash, and the seconds after the car crash, because your entire being has been put through such a, in the words of Gurdjieff, a shock, time expands into the fact that you're now experiencing sort of objective time from a higher source. You no longer can be, dragged into that subjective framework. And so in the sense that he's saying that Hussein is 4,000 years old, he's 4,000 years old in the sense that it seems that he has achieved to some degree, an ability to expand time out and experience time in a longer in that objective fashion. So that is sort of my reading of how he's understanding it. Does that somewhat make a little bit of sense?
Yeah, I mean, I think it makes sense. It's just kind of interesting trying to, I guess, reframe like how we perceive time to how other people could, like, these beings would perceive time, from their kind of vantage point, especially since it seems that they live, much longer periods of how we understand time. Um, it's definitely an interesting thought exercise, putting yourself in like these different frames of trying to look at those perspectives.
Yeah, I mean, because I think the difficult thing is that it's not like they're simply older. It's that their minutes have almost like an unfolding of time in them. So they have a richer experiential current within their minute as opposed to our minute, which is, you know, has a higher connection to objective time. Objective time, pardon me. So it's like, yeah, it's like a concealed time, it seems. But it's very difficult to do. It's very difficult to put your mind in that framework of how that could even be. Um, Same with, I think this is why Gurdjieff sort of reiterating at the start when he starts saying, oh, the beings of the planet Earth call these years and days and months, and he puts all these in quotation marks. I think it's like an emphasis of our associative notion of what time is, and yet if we weren't to have those, what would really, that's a pretty basic statement which has been put forth by like primitivists and some currents of Marxism, which is like, well, if you remove clock time as a sociological associative thing, you no longer say, well, I'll be there at that time, or it is 3 o'clock, or it goes on from six till 8:30. What happens? How does your understanding of time sort of alter in the face of a removal of artificial duration? Time then would become not a matter of quantification, but a matter of qualification, right? It's not the quantity of time, but it's the quality of time. What can happen if you're attending to time from a higher influence? The difference between each higher, sort of level of influence on the what is understood as the period of 10 minutes is going to be different for each level of being. That is how I sort of see it.
Yeah, I mean, I think like objective time is a lot to do with what Gurdjieff criticizes, right? Because it's artificial, is a consensus. It's just just people just thought, whoa, this should be the norm, right? I mean, time, for example, he says here, time in itself does not exist. There is only the totality of the results issuing from all the cosmic phenomena present in a given place. Uh, it's just the phenomena, right? Like time is just another frame, another layer of I don't know, general stuff.
Yeah. No, agreed. It's like it's a level of personality.
Yeah. So yeah, that means just oh, I don't know. It's a pretty weird chapter, really.
Mm-hmm.
It's almost like one of those cliche acid trip conversations, It's like the cosmos inside the decanter of water, or the different cosmoi.
I thought, like, I don't know. I mean, this is something in this that I I've sort of not intuited. I'm not going to say that I was completely on the same lines of Gurdjieff, but since I was younger, the idea of when you're outside and you're like playing with insects or messing around, with bugs, I always remember thinking from their point of view in the relation to, like, not that I fully understand it at all, but Einstein's idea of time is relative, and like what happens in terms of space and time when you do get bigger or smaller, right? Is what is the temporal experience of, like, my hand coming down over an ant, right? Is that I think it was I was reading, and this experience, this idea of like how that is changing, um, is relayed in Maurice Nichols' commentaries on Gurdjieff and Ouspensky, and he's saying sort of along the same lines as this. This is probably why it's popped into my head, so I'm not going to take credit for it at all. Is that to a beetle, if you were to sort of scoop it up with your hand, the process of your hand coming in to the side of a beetle is like years. There's just been almost this mountain of my hand slowly moving into this beetle for years due to that size difference. So what's going on in that the drop of water, if you dropped a drop of water into a decanter, those beings, in quotation marks, I still don't really know how to take that. Those infinitesimal beings that are existing in that decanter, they aren't so much witnessing, the drop come down in our time, because time is relative. What they would be seeing is a huge, ginormous sphere of blue very, very slowly descend and slowly merge with their existence, and the waves would be a slow thing as well, right? In the same sense of, as we look up into the planets, that the drop of water going into the decanter from the perspective of the beings in the decanter is exactly the same, as above so below, and the micro to macro cosmos is exactly the same spatiotemporal process as us looking at planets, right? And from the planet's perspective, there's something else. The universe, the movements of solar systems is only takes a year in respect to a planet, and a planet. So the Earth, the moon moving around the Earth takes a day with respect to us, and then as it gets outer and outer, it sort of begins this relative octave of almost like time compression. And it seems that in that there's some sort of almost temporal equilibrium. And I think what Gurdjieff's getting at is that on each of those layers of the influences, where he says there's less laws. So, the moon has a certain amount of laws. And I think on Earth we have 48 laws, I believe. Don't quote me on that one. On Earth we have 48 laws. They're the ones we are beholden to. That's the amount of laws we have to sort of break through to become free of these constraints. He's saying that in drawing in those influences from the other levels of creation, from the sun, the solar system, potentially even the absolute, you're drawing from a place which has less laws. Therefore, you're not beholden to that same sense of subjective time, which is developed under a certain amount of laws. So when you're attentive, and when you're sound like a real stoner, as we were joking about, when you're breaking through in that mode of attention and waking up out of sleep, when you're drawing in these influences, you're entering into a greater freedom, which itself is also a greater freedom of time. And in doing that, I mean, I still can't really say for sure. I've been trying to practice self-remembering very, very hard recently. It's not a difficult thing to understand how to do. It's just the fact of being conscious of yourself while you're doing things, which you can only do for, at most, when you first start, 10, 20 seconds, 30 seconds at a time. But those moments have intuitively seemed like expansions of time, as if, so for instance, any of us who drive, if you're doing a 40-minute drive, which is maybe, however many miles, that can become, because in driving, you're that's the time, at least for me, I'm in some of the deepest sleep, right? I'm so associative, because in Gurdjieffian terms, driving is such an instinctive process, an instinctual movement process, that I don't have to do anything, right? My body just takes over. And if I actually think about driving, I mess it up. I'm like, you just do it. Once you learn to drive, you just drive, like riding a bike. But in doing that, the automation just completely takes over. And 1 minute I'm at home, and the next minute I'm, in quotation marks, 40 minutes away. Whereas if I was, if I could be truly conscious of that 40-minute, once again in quotation marks, that 40-minute journey, being attentive of things that I never were attentive to. What's the sky like? What are the sounds? Etc., etc. And really open up experience and remember the experience and remember myself while I'm experiencing it. That duration of time would expand for me. But it's a question of getting out of sleep. That's the practical step. I hope that example somewhat helps as well.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's nice. Actually, you're getting into like the practical aspect of it. I think it's very important. And I mean, this for this car, like driving a car example, it's weird because I think the main reason that you fall asleep, I think it's like a repetition of the same thing going over and over again.
Mm-hmm.
It's like a lullaby of reality, let's say. It was crazy. But it's just like when things repeat. But I feel like sometimes like this repetition of things is not really a repetition of things, but a repetition of your idea or your concept of what's happening. I mean, for example, as you said, what if there was a skylight? It was like a sunshine, or a deer walking over the street, or like a weird car. It's things that get your attention, right? But it's weird how, like, I don't know how the brain works on these like events that are like sufficiently like relevant for us to point our attention to.
Mm.
So I don't know. Yeah, I mean, just blabbering about what you said. I don't know.
No. It definitely makes sense. I mean, the example of you know, if there's a deer, or if there's maybe a car crash, or um, a road closure on the that method of repetition that you're on about. These could be seen as shocks. There's something which shocks you out of that repetitive stasis, where you have to see it as a new, right? A section of road that you've driven down, maybe if it's your route to work, hundreds and hundreds of times, maybe thousands of times, becomes um, just an automatic experience. But all of a sudden, a section of road that you've never paid attention to, a deer jumps out in front of you, and you stop in a place that you never would have stopped, and all of a sudden you have to do things completely out of your automatism, and you suddenly notice, oh, I've never noticed that fallen tree there on the side of the road, because you just don't. And all, so you could definitely see them as shocks. And that's, they're an interesting idea. And I think shocks is sort of the key thing, I think, for anyone who wants to start practice. Is something I've found helpful, is almost mentally, when I see certain things, it's like a trigger, like, right, you've got to remember to self-remember. But I wake up and I look at a stack of Gurdjieff books, which is sort of like enough for me to go, like, okay. But you soon forget, and some days it's better, some days it's worse. But it's an interesting process for sure.
What about boredom? Does Gurdjieff ever directly comment on boredom? Because it seems like he's saying that's a specifically human experience, maybe.
Do you know what I mean? Boredom. I mean, that's a really interesting idea and really interesting topic of what Gurdjieff would make of boredom, especially modern boredom. I mean, I think we'd have to. I'd sort of throw that question back to you, and how it's difficult now I think about it. I've never thought about it. I mean, what is boredom?
Yeah, no, it's interesting because I mean it's exactly not self-remembering and not being present and
Yeah,
not experiencing the world that's in front of you, right?
yeah. It's finding. Usually, it's the excuses that you haven't got something to let you to sleep. Right? You haven't got, like, I'm bored because my TV. There's nothing on TV. I guess for Gurdjieff it would be like if you're existing correctly in the sense of his practices, there just couldn't be such a thing as boredom, because self-remembering itself is such a not exhausting, but a almost demanding practice that life should constantly being anew for you. And I mean, one way to almost, like, for me, one thing I've found really helpful to sort of basically make any building that I've gone into, even ones that I've gone into hundreds of times, like supermarkets nearby. If you want to make them new, look up. It sounds really weird, but honestly, we don't look up. It's a super associative thing that we're taught from a young age. No one looks up. If you go into a building that you've been to 1,000 times, look up, and it will be new to you. It's a really interesting thing.
That's perfect. Actually, that happened. Exactly the same thing happened to me. I was just going to college, and all day taking the bus, taking the train, and I will never look up to the sky, like the top of the buildings and all that. And the first time I did, it was just like it always stuck to me. I always look at the top of the buildings, which before I didn't. So it's I think this question of boredom also is I don't know. It's fuck. It just ran out of my mind. I had it, but it ran away. You can go ahead.
I was going to say that's pretty funny because, well, I grew up in the '80s, and there was a TV show once that started by saying people don't look up.
Was Pippin? Look up, look down, look all around.
I didn't see that one.
Oh,
That's a good one
okay.
though.
Yeah, there was a show that also did that with me, and coincidentally, they had like a light aircraft, and they used to fly. So it's like a. But I think maybe that's the process of boredom. The boredom then is that you basically are the same habitual associative sort of loop that has somehow sort of kept you asleep for so long.
Yeah. Can I just add this?
Mhm.
I just remember now. The thing about boredom is that mainly, at least in my experience, is that you conceptualize things to do or things that you will direct your attention to. So it's like, for example, you take like, oh, I won't do this or that because like I had such experience and I have a concept of what this is, and I just don't do it, right? I don't do it, and then I get into boredom because I feel like boredom. I had like some extreme experiences with boredom, but like boredom is it's like a hole. You keep digging, and when you find like the last piece, you can't dig any anymore. It's just fucking hell, man. Because I don't know. It's just it's like infinite boredom. It's real, man, and it's hell. It's like literally hell because you basically conceptualize everything, and you just create a distance between you and the reality because you're just like you're with concepts actually, just thoughts. And I mean, I think this. I mean, Gurdjieff, everything he talks about is really going back to experience in a way, like a real experience, not only like general stuff and concepts and all of that. But yeah, just about boredom. I'm pretty. I worked a lot with boredom already. It's hell, man. It's hell. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean that's a that's a super good way of putting it though, because I mean in boredom, like you say, you conceptualize everything, but the problem then is your conceptualization. You need to stop associating it. Like in conceptualizing things, you are more than likely in Gurdjieffian terms being asleep. You're associating, right? They're all associative, so it's like, oh, that thing isn't enough. That thing isn't like that thing. That is that. This experience isn't like that time I had that amazing experience where I wasn't bored, right? Instead of like not in Gurdjieffian terms, not identifying with everything. So in identifying with it, you are trying to sculpt it into a way which is meant to constantly conform to you. Instead of doing that by not identifying, by attempting at least to self-remember and not associate, you're allowing the experience to just be what it is. And I mean that idea of infinite boredom is how we could you could see that infinite boredom I think would be someone who has realized sleep is a thing and that they can wake up but they haven't got the means to do it, right? They're like they know there's a prison but they've no one has told them, or like they've got a vague idea of a prison, so they're just constantly like doing the same thing instead of like just allowing things to be and just purely experiencing. They're constantly associating, and in that sense, they never get anywhere because they're constantly like in the loop of their own associations, their own mind. But I mean, and maybe to a degree, that's like what a certain aspect of Gurdjieffian practice is like what happens when you get to the end of existential boredom, right? What happens when you've come to the end of your associations? I mean, that's an interesting
Well,
idea.
yeah, yeah, yeah. I agree completely. At least for me, when I reach, I think I reach infinite boredom. I tried to kill myself actually, but I didn't. But I was just saved by someone else. But yeah, it reaches a point where anything you do is just you can't do anything because it's related to some association, and eventually it's just. But anyway, just talk about concepts. Is that really? I feel like they're like gears, like concepts. They're gears that like keep up the machine of sleep. I don't know if this makes sense, but concepts and conceptualizations and ideas and all that, they kind of like work they work to make your life easier in a way that you don't have to experience everything all the time, or you have to go to this supposedly hardship of having to experience and paying attention to existence and yourself and yourself. So I feel like all this, like these kinds of like concepts and all that is just gears. I can't put it right, but I feel like they just facilitate for a
Mhm.
process that makes us sleep even more. It's kind of how I feel about it.
Yeah, no. I think you put it. Really well. I mean that's the problem with identifying and then in relation to the idea that you've said about concepts is that we constantly fall back on our own concepts, even if they're ones that we believe are. And this is where the problem of indulging in negative thoughts comes in. Even if these people who do get really really bored, one of the concepts which comes in is the idea of like, oh, I'm bored because everything's meaningless. But that's an indulgence in your own negative associations of life. You've developed that concept, like you say, as almost like a crutch because you can't put in the effort to truly experience things. So just as the experience is about to be there, all of a sudden this associative concept comes in of like, oh my god, this is so bad. So instead of experiencing experience, you just experience your own association of what that experience is. And instead of like just letting I mean, one example, like it's a pretty cheap example, but I was reading some stuff on a forum the other day about rain, and like everyone looks outside and basically has the same associative experience of being caught in rain or seeing rain, which is like, oh my god, like it's raining, it's so bad. And I mean that on a very like phenomenal boring level is a great example of like how the experience has been ruined. I mean, to what degree is that bad? So like the experience is there. Why not just experience rain for what it is, as opposed to like the experience is instantly changed and turned into an indulgence of negativity, and potentially then boredom, because you have all these associations relating to the experience of rain.
Yeah, I mean, in this case, concepts will be umbrellas, right? They just like they
That's
keep
good.
you safe from reality. It's just a safe place. But I mean, it's weird how everyone's like so afraid to like the raid's like so completely inoffensive, and it's uh, it's just how it can attach to experience associations and all that. Yeah.
That's really well put. Um, yeah, I mean, does anyone have any other comments on this section, or comments in general?
Is this the first place where he mentions the astral body, or is
Yeah, the
Kesjan
Kezjan body, I think it is.
body?
Yeah. Yeah, Kezjan. Let me check. I'm fairly sure it is. Um,
Is that a key concept for him, or because I know I've read something about him talking about the astral
um,
body?
not like it's one that So yeah. So the first reference 131, and then there's 437 and 10 and 1050, um, which is according to the full Fulaznit Namnian principle, which I'll look into in a second. They were obliged to exist until there was coated in them and completely perfected by reason what is called the body Kesjan, or the astral body. Um, and then there's a few other references around page 720 and then 802. So there's probably about almost 10 references for it throughout the book. Um, and let me just uh, just find out what uh, the function means. Sorry about this. There's a lot of FOR words. There we go. Fool's name. The first kind of first principle of being existence, which is called Fulaz Nit Amnian, is proper to the existence of all three brain beings arising on a planet of our great universe, and the fundamental aim and sense of the existence of these beings is that proceed through them the transmutation of cosmic substances necessary for the Trogo auto-ecocratic process. Now let's go find what that means. So, in that, there's a process which draws in cosmic substances and allows us to undertake this other process, which I know is a very key concept. Let me find it.
That's the Trago.
Yeah,
Auto.
Trogo auto ego. There we go. Everything in the universe, both the intentionally created and the later automatically arisen, exists and is maintained exclusively on the basis of what is called the common cosmic Trogo auto-ecocratic process. The most great common cosmic auto-ecocratic process was actualized by the most endless. This system, which maintains everything arisen and existing, was actualized by our endless creator. That is called the exchange of substances, or the reciprocal feeding of everything that exists. This, as I understand it, is sort of a great equilibrium, right? So it's just a birth, death, suffering, pleasure, etc. It's a great equilibrium of sort of reciprocal maintenance and feeding of the universe. So in the sense that these three processes interlock, you have the astral body, which feeds on cosmic substances, and that feeding itself is also keeping that greater process going. But as with regards to the Gurdjieff body, as I understand it, so Gurdjieff's sort of big difference between a lot of Neoplatonists who he's drawing from, and I guess to a degree Christianity that he's drawing from, is that Gurdjieff doesn't believe he believes in souls, but he doesn't believe we have souls a priori, straight away. We have to develop souls. We have to crystallize something within us, which then develops our soul. Which is why when he was talking about the Gurdjieff body, he was on about the development of that, so that we aren't destroyed completely. So his point is that really the two choices that you have is that you develop, you come across this work, you come across these what we call magnetic influences, right? The scripture, the higher books, the ancient teachings. You come across these and you see them, you understand them for what they are, and you from them you put the effort in, you crystallize something in yourself, and you develop a body. Go towards developing a soul, and this doesn't sort of take you to heaven. I think for Gurdjieff, this continues you into another life, and perhaps eventually, you get higher and higher and higher. Now, and then of course your other option is, well, you don't spend the effort, and you just no longer exist. Maybe you come back at another point as someone completely different, but the point is that you sort of, it's almost like a continual development. Now for Uspensky, he applies this to recurrence, and he was saying that he agreed with Gurdjieff in terms, but instead of it sort of being a different person, it's recurring. It's the same life is recurring, but if you crystallize something in one life, when you begin the other life, you remember certain things sort of intuitively, and you can change your life accordingly. Not to the extent of like, oh, you remember lottery numbers or something like that, but you change it in the sense of, you do certain things sooner, or you develop yourself sooner, and eventually, of course, this would then you develop yourself towards a greater and greater higher being. Both of them have a sort of terror in them, because Uspensky was saying we only have a limited amount of times to do this, which led him at the end of his life to drive for a month or so around every key spot in his life and really instill it in his memory, so that he's basically saying, look, the next time I have to remember, and I have to remember all these places now, so next time something awakens in me. And he said he'd had some experiences of this before. When he was younger, he went to this college, and they didn't know where it's school, and they didn't know where the headmaster's office was, and he just instinctively knew. And he sort of said he'd had a couple of these experiences throughout his life, where sort of a cosmic remembering. And obviously for Gurdjieff, the terror, I guess, is saying, well, you just won't exist if you don't do this. So that's the overarching goal. In the bigger goal above self-development is the development of a soul, which then continues you through, and that is that is the body Kesjan, or the Kesjan body, as I understand it. So yeah. Does anyone have anything else they'd like to add? No. Okay then. Thanks everyone for coming. Next week, I think, like I said at the start, we finally begin. Yeah, we begin the arc. Well, we tackle the arc absurd. This was obviously the book so far tough at parts, sometimes dense, but it's still quite fun. This is the first bit where I remember really quite struggling, but I think it may be easier now reading it out and working with other people. So, but it's only 14 pages, so hopefully it'll be okay. So it's just 134 to 148. Next week will be on I think it will be on a Wednesday again. Let me just double check that for you. Yeah, it'll be so next week will be next week we'll do Wednesday. So yeah, Wednesday at this time. Thanks for all for coming, and I'll see you all then.
Thank you.
Thanks. See you. Bye bye.
Thank you, everyone.